Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as What If Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto Vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
KPS Naruto will learn Edo Tensei instead of Kajibin Sin to live his mother. As a wise man said, history revolves around small moments, and the flutter of a butterfly can cause a hurricane. Some changes are subtle, some are obvious, and some are somewhere in between. Of course, the opposite is also true, and some actions, whether taken or not, may not have any effect on the development of things. For example, it didn't matter if the Sandai Myokai had Naruto Uzumaki Hinchiriki of the Kubino Kitsune, guarded by Ambu, or simply applied draconian punishments, since after a few years, people stopped trying to use physical force in any way and simply hurt the child with his behavior rather than with his actions, except for the occasional drunk. So, while the carefully considered decision of a wise man, in a very important position, whatever it was completely meaningless. It may seem ironic that a child's decision, taken on a whim, can cause such a big change in the course of events. But that's life. -0, Naruto smiled. He had just taken the scroll Mizuki had indicated to him, knocking out Gigi with a technique he originally invented. As a joke, but it was very useful against perverts, especially against men. Now he just had to learn a scroll technique, and he would be a genin. This was much easier than the stupid Bunsen no Jutsu. Or so he thought, until he opened the scroll. Gruno. Kajibin without no jutsu. I can't even do the normal one. Of course, Naruto would not give up and would use that absurd technique until he mastered it. Just when he was about to learn the jutsu that, according to fate, would become his signature move, Naruto demonstrated why they called him unpredictable. Decipherable by looking at the scroll again. Wait, Mizuki-sensei mentioned a technique, and the scroll is quite big. Let's see if there's something easier there. Naruto was not one to give up, but even Iruka-sensei, the nicest of the teachers, had noticed that perhaps Naruto just had no talent for cloning techniques and that he would be better at others since that, for example, he was a teacher at the Eng. So Naruto opened the scroll even more, looking for something that would catch his eye. And just when he was about to give up and learn Kajibin-sin, he found a different one from everyone else. Hey, someone scribbled on the parchment. I hope they don't blame me, Naruto muttered to himself, before realizing that whoever had done it had not only scribbled, but had apparently corrected and improved it. Really, a technique that someone had put so much effort into had to be good. And apparently it wasn't very complicated either, since it hardly required hand signals. When reading the instructions, it was not a simple jutsu, but one that was activated with a sealing matrix and a single hand signal. Although Gigi had once told him that stamping was a very difficult art, when reviewing the instructions, Naruto felt very simple. All he needed was a blank parchment, something he used to carry around with him to quickly jot down any joke ideas that came to mind, and copy them down. Of course, that was just the basic condition, but the parchment said that the rest was practically automatic. And only the two ingredients were needed. Surely, just knowing it would count as having learned it, wouldn't it? So Naruto started copying the stamp, and finding it surprisingly easy, he copied everything else written about that technique. On a different scroll, both the original notes and everything that someone had added before making a second scroll. Although technically it was the third one with the original version. Then he rolled up the parchment again, carefully reread everything, and tried to memorize the sealing dies. -0, Iruka was in a panic. What the hell had prompted Naruto to steal the forbidden scroll? Half the village was desperately looking for him, and Iruka had no doubt that if they found him first, Naruto would be involved in a much bigger mess. Many would use lethal force, and no matter how troublesome Naruto was, the boy did not deserve. Nor was he prepared to receive such punishment. Besides, Naruto wasn't one to betray. Probably all this was just a stupid joke that he had come up with. Of course, the boy was also very good at hiding, so the chances of him being found right away were almost nil. So what Iruka had to do was stop running around like a headless chicken and use his head. After all, that was how he always caught the blonde. Stop thinking like a shinobi and remember your prankster days. Naruto probably thinks it's a joke, so he won't be too far away from Konoha. Now, if I took something and wanted to lay low for a while everyone else was looking, and keep them looking for a while, where would I go? He came up with several places, depending on whether Naruto wanted to observe the chaos or just hide. Knowing Naruto, the former was more likely, so he ran through his mental list from the place with the best view in the village to the most hidden one. Without Iruka seeing him, another man was at his heels. Mizuki, who had spent almost an hour cursing himself for being so stupid as not to designate a place for Naruto to deliver the scroll to him, had decided that since Iruka seemed to have a magical gift for finding the blonde brat, he would simply follow Instructor Chunin, letting his old friend guide him to his goal. The plan had to be slightly modified, but it was still on track. He smiled a little. He would soon hand over the forbidden scroll to Orochimaru-sama and be rewarded handsomely for his service. -0, Naruto smiled. It was not as much as he thought, but he managed to memorize more or less the modified version. For some reason, the Matrix easily took over his mind. It was still a little difficult for him to remember the original Matrix, but with a few more minutes he should memorize them. A creaking sound was heard and Iruka landed in front of Naruto. The blonde boy jumped up. "Ha, Iruka-sensei, I found you," he screamed. Iruka frowned. "I found you, you idiot," he shouted, preparing to berate the boy, when Naruto smiled. "Sensei, I learned a jutsu from the scroll. I even memorized the Matrix. I'll pass." Did Iruka Parpalio, jutsu? Matrix? What was the boy talking about? "Naruto, what do you mean?" Naruto stopped talking. "Huh. The hidden Genin test, of course. Mizuki-sensei said that if he learned a scroll technique, he would be a Genin." Iruka blinked. Why would Mizuki say such nonsense? Unless... His eyes widened as he heard the steel cutting through the air. I had very little time. Either dodging, or, without thinking about it, Iruka pushed Naruto aside, taking multiple kunai instead of the boy. Mizuki appeared smiling. "Well done, you managed to find it. I knew I could count on you, Iruka. Now, Naruto, give me that scroll." Iruka pulled one of the swords out of the flesh. "Naruto, no. That scroll contains a forbidden jutsu sealed by the Ukages. He must not get it." Mizuki's face contracted, before an evil smile spread on it. "Hey, Naruto, do you want me to tell you why everyone hates you?" Naruto blinked. Why do they hate me? He had asked himself that question countless times. Iruka opened his eyes a lot. "No, Mizuki, that's forbidden." Mizuki laughed. 12 years ago, the Kyuubi attacked. At that time, a law was enacted. Naruto blinked. A law? Mizuki nodded. Yes, a law that said no one could reveal that Naruto Uzumaki. Maki was the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Other words were said, but Naruto didn't hear them. His eyes were wide open, and he felt strangely disconnected from the world. Him, the Kyuubi. Suddenly, the looks and the murmurs made sense. But wait, what about what Gigi had given him? Naruto's greatest treasure. Was it a lie? He only woke up from his surprise to see Iruka on top of him, with one of Mizuki's giant shurikens embedded in his back. The man tried to comfort him, cried for him, he knew what loneliness was. He said, "Run," and Naruto ran. Naruto. Naruto was sitting behind a tree. He had just witnessed Iruka cheating on Mizuki, and that man was furious. "Why are you resisting? You can't win. Naruto is just like me with the scroll. We can finally do whatever we want." "Yes," Iruka replied, and Naruto felt that his fears, the darker ones, were confirmed. Before Iruka continued, "That's what the fox would do. But Naruto is not the fox. He is one of my excellent students." Naruto felt the tears running down his face. Finally, someone recognized him. Mizuki Gruno. "Original, I planned to leave you alive for a while longer, as a tribute to our friendship, but I changed my mind." He dies. He charged at the fallen master, his giant shuriken spinning like a chainsaw. Suddenly, an orange stain threw him into the air. "Don't touch Iruka-sensei, or I'll kill you." Mizuki spat out some blood. "Try it, demon," she screamed, before throwing a crib at him and Naruto. The blonde cocked his head, letting the sword pass, but turned in shock as he heard the steel piercing the flesh. The crib and had caught up with Iruka on the arm. "What's the matter?" the white-haired traitor scoffed. "I thought you were going to kill me now." Naruto pounced on him. Mizuki was preparing to deal him a single devastating blow when Naruto did something unexpected. Instead of just pouncing on Mizuki, Naruto kicked the dirt in front of him. To him, throwing dust in his eyes. The fact that Mizuki had slightly crouched down to better counter the boy's attack made it even more effective, as the blinded man staggered backwards, lashing out blindly in front of him. Naruto pulled out to kunai, ducked under the blows, jumped low, flying through Mizuki's legs, and drove the blades into the back of Mizuki's knees. The traitor screamed in pain as he fell to the ground, his legs too damaged to carry him. Panting heavily, Mizuki glared at Naruto angrily. "For this, demon, I'm going to kill you slowly," he snapped as he pulled the knives out of his legs and threw them blindly. Naruto looked at him coldly. "You won't get the chance." He held out his hands. The left one took out a scroll, although smaller than the forbidden scroll, and spread it on the floor. The right one, on the other hand, reached into his jacket and pulled something out of a hidden pocket over the heart. One of Naruto's weaknesses was that, since no one was there to teach him common values, there were certain things that Naruto didn't fully understand. Apart from some uncertainty about how to behave in public, this particularly involved his morals. Since no one was teaching him what was right and what was wrong, he only told descriptions and stories of certain actions, and how people reacted. So, although I had understood that murdering, hurting the innocent, and betraying were wrong, and it was by nature of those who believed in the goodness of people, everything I had heard always said that there were really evil people, and that those people should die. That's why he didn't hesitate to use his new technique with Mizuki, and he had even learned it. What Naruto took out of his pocket was his greatest treasure, more valuable to him than his life. Gigi had given it to him when he was expelled from the orphanage, after explaining to Naruto that he had been orphaned during the attack of the Kumi. -0, flashback scene, Gigi, who were my parents? 6-year-old Naruto asked. Sarutobi sighed. They were good people, Naruto, and they loved you very much, don't doubt it. But they died in the attack of the Kyugi, protecting you and the whole village from the demon's wrath, so they were shinobi, Naruto asked. Sarutovia felt. Yes. Very good. They were very strong, which unfortunately also means that they gained a lot of enemies. Naruto, I can't tell you their names because, the less people know about it, the less likely it is that one of those enemies will find out and try to kill you in revenge. Naruto blinked. That Gigi knew her parents' names, but didn't tell her, hurt her more than she imagined. Gigi, really? I can't have anything from them. Sarutobi knew how much the boy longed to have a family, and how much his decline would hurt. Then he remembered something. In fact, maybe it is. He started rummaging through different shelves, before pulling out a small box and handing it to Naruto. When the boy opened it, he found a lock of red hair. What is this, Gigi? He waved and smiled. That, Naruto, is a lock of your mother's hair. Well, considering that her hair was straight, tuft may not be the most appropriate term, but the message is clear. Naruto looked at the hair, stroking it carefully as if it was going to turn to dust if he wasn't careful. From me. Mother. She hugged him to her chest with tears in her eyes. Thank you, Gigi. I promise that I will be an even better shinobi than my parents, so that they will be proud of me. Sarutobi smiled when he saw the boy running out. I'm sure they're very proud of you already, Naruto, he muttered to himself. End of the flashback -0, I really hope Gigi told the truth. True, Naruto thought as he tapped the red hairs on the seal and made a hand signal. She felt her chakra slowly depleting as the seals spread across the floor, surrounding the bewildered Mizuki. What are you doing? Asked the traitor, before something like ashes and bivolvo will rise up, adhering to his body. He screamed in anguish as he consumed it, leaving a different figure lying in the center of the seals. -0, the Sandai Myokai had watched the last few minutes through his crystal orb with growing concern. The old man believed it was impossible for Naruto to have appropriated the scroll, because if the boy had really wanted to betray him, he would not have forgiven him after taking the trouble to knock him out. So, using his orb, he found Naruto, apparently trying to memorize something. In fact, it was quite funny to see the boy's face, contracted by concentration. Then, he witnessed the arrival of Iruka and Mizuki, and how the latter broke the law. No matter how small the possibility, emotional instability could weaken the seal, and even if the fox could not escape, he could possess Naruto's body. His chest filled with pride when Iruka proclaimed Naruto his excellent student, and even more so when Naruto brilliantly incapacitated a Chunin-level opponent. Just for this, Sarutobi could justify a promotion to Genin, especially if it was considered that Naruto's failure was due to simply having too much chance. Chakra for such a weak jutsu as Bunsen, and he would probably do very well once his master gave him a better cloning technique. Then, all of a sudden, he groaned in almost physical pain when he saw what Naruto was doing. "Oh, Naruto," he muttered to himself, "of all the jutsus on the scroll, why did you have to learn that one?" -0, Naruto smiled, barely out of breath from the exercise. "Edo Tensei, success," he muttered before looking at the figure he had summoned. Now the truth would come out, and Naruto prayed with all his heart that Jiji had told the truth. A groan brought Naruto's attention back to the current situation. "Oh, where am I?" An obviously feminine voice asked, as the figure, still a little disoriented, stood up. She was a woman with long red hair. Her skin was a little pale, and she had what looked like cracks in some areas, but she was very pretty. Naruto swallowed hard. I knew that the next few seconds could break her heart, and, honestly, I was afraid of what might happen. Was she really his mother? If so, did he really love him as much as Jiji said, or did the old man just want to comfort him? "Mom, he asked in a trembling voice. Iruka's eyes widened at Naruto's words. That was impossible. No way. His gaze fell on the forbidden scroll that Naruto was carrying on his back. "Naruto," he wondered, "what exactly did you do?" The woman turned and looked at him confused. Suddenly, he opened his eyes a lot. "Naruto, the first chapter is finished, just in time for the holidays. It just came to my mind and didn't leave me alone until I wrote it. I always read those stories where the weirdest things are on the scroll, from common jutsus to legendary weapons and xenomorph eggs. And although some are great, I wanted to write one a little more realistic. The truth is that I'm a little surprised that, from what I've seen, no one else has come up with it. The Edo Tensei was invented by the Nidaime Okage and consists of seals, so in my opinion, it is more than likely that it is on the Forbidden Scroll. Orochimaru must have learned it from somewhere, right? I know the chances that he actually wrote his own improvements and variations on the scroll are slim, but in my story, he worked on it not with the intention of using it as Kabuto, but as a way to get a better understanding of life and death for your immortality technique. And at the time he worked on the Edo Tensei, he was still more or less loyal to the blade, and basically wanted to leave proof that he had managed to make a better version of something than an Okage, no matter that the Midei was developed for me from scratch. So yes, instead of the Kajibunsen, Naruto's signature move will be the Edo Tensei. For obvious reasons, it won't be used as profusely as Naruto uses his clones of his shadow, and it is quite possible that Naruto will learn the Kajibunsen, but it will not be used as much as in the canon. And no, Naruto won't act like Kabuto, sending the dead into battle while he stays miles away from the action. He's just not the guy for that. And their invocations will not be slaves without fear either. On that subject, the reason I made Kushina not act like a lifeless doll was the observation that when Torun was revived, he acted like a real human for a few seconds when Kabuto stuck the slave tag on his head. And why didn't Naruto turn away in disgust when reading the instructions? He decided that he would only use it on really bad and redeemable people to revive those who died prematurely. And for those who claim that Naruto valued all life in the canon, I didn't see him shed a single tear for Gitu and his men. Oh, and for those of you who are wondering, It boomed. It means blasphemy or sacrilege, and it's a pretty obvious reference to the Leto tense way and interrupting the cycle of life. The pairings are again undecided. I am open to suggestions. Do you like the idea? Should it continue, and if so, who do you believe? It's just that Naruto will call again. Minato is not an option, as he does not reside in the pure world. Kushina blinked. The last thing he remembered was dying in the grip of the QB, with the certainty that his son was safe. And that the beast that, in the end, had failed to keep prisoner would be locked up again where he could not harm anyone. So he was very surprised to find himself in the hard earth of a forest. For a moment, she thought she was in heaven, before faint echoes of what could be memories assaulted her, and told her that it wasn't like that, and that the afterlife was different. It was just a strange hunch, but she was pretty sure she was right. He usually did. "Mom. Mom," said a voice from behind. He turned around and saw an injured Koen shinobi that looked vaguely familiar to him, and a boy with an orange jumpsuit, tan blonde hair, blue eyes, and birthmarks that looked like whiskers. He looks like a Chibi Minato with a rounder face, Kushina thought. The shape of his face reminded him of his own as a young man, which had temporarily earned him the nickname Tomato. Until a brutal beating made him change it to the damn Havana man. And the marks that looked like whiskers reminded him of the ones he had seen on his own. No way. "Naruto?" he asked. The boy opened his eyes a lot. He seemed unable to speak. "Are you Naruto?" "Misoki?" Kushina asked again. The boy kept staring at her before rushing towards her, hugging her, and wetting her stomach with his tears. Sometimes I could make out the word mom. Almost awkwardly, he patted the boy on the head. How could he be so old? He looked to be about 12 years old. Then he noticed that his hand was grayish and seemed to have some cracks. Looking around, he saw a complex seal on the ground. Although there were too many to analyze them with the naked eye, little by little, a suspicion was emerging that was accentuated by seeing the forbidden scroll on the back of his sochi. "Naruto, what's wrong?" Naruto looked at her and realized that she was looking at his hand. "Well, I called you here, Mom." Kushina blinked, her suspicion confirmed. He could only hope that the injured man leaning on the tree was not the sacrifice to call Naruto's father. His voice sounded deadly serious. "Naruto, who did you sacrifice to call me?" I had heard of Leto Tensei, although I had never seen him. The man in the back spoke, a traitor who tricked Naruto into stealing the forbidden scroll, and then tried to kill us both. Kushina's face went from serious and accusing to relieved and happy. "Oh, in that case, I'm glad to see you, Sochi," she cried as she hugged her son. She had wanted to do it since she got pregnant, and she had never had enough opportunities. Then he talked about another topic. The jutsu is not complete yet. His body was cold, and he felt inert, as if he was wearing heavy armor in the middle of winter. Naruto looked at her. "But I don't want you to be a mindless soldier," he screamed. Kushina carefully took the scroll from him, unrolled it until Naruto pointed out where the passage was. And he observed the seal that completed the jutsu and that was placed on the invoked body. While the first part of the jutsu was quite complex, the second version was even more so. The final part was almost ridiculously easy for someone with Kushina's level in stamps. It seems that simple works best for the last part. Let's see, if I change this, and add this and this as an improvement for the physical body, then. Ready. She held up a new label before putting it on her son. Ready. With this one, I will have free will and control of my body. Naruto looked at the label. Are you sure? Kushina rolled her eyes. I'm an Uzumaki, of course I'm sure. Now do it. Hesitantly, Naruto pressed the tag against his mother's head, quickly withdrawing his hand as it sank into his head. Like a stone in a lake. Kushina sighed. A healthy pink color spread over her body, the cracks disappeared, while her hair, which previously seemed a little dull, regained a new shine. The only sign that something was wrong was his eyes. Although a new glimmer of life had invaded them, the sclera had turned black. Kushina smiled. Ah, much better. The man, who was observing the scene with a mixture of worry, confusion and happiness for his secretly favorite student, spoke up. Naruto, come here for a moment. Naruto obeyed. Yes, Iruka-sensei. Iruka smiled. Close your eyes for a moment. Naruto didn't know why, but he closed his eyes. You can open them now. Iruka's voice was heard. When Naruto opened his eyes, he immediately noticed that Iruka wasn't wearing the forehead protector. When he touched his forehead, instead of the glasses, he felt a metal plate with an engraving. The tears rolled down her cheeks again. Iruka smiled. Congratulations, Naruto. How about we celebrate this with some ramen? The boy jumped into his arms and hugged him. While Naruto was jumping for joy, Kushina approached Iruka. Then you're not going to bother him for learning a forbidden technique of dubious moral integrity. Iruka shrugged his shoulders. He's a good kid, and he defeated a Chunin-level opponent. That's why I awarded him the title of Genin. The rest depends on the Sandame. Kushina arched an eyebrow. So the old man took up the mantle of Hokage again, huh? This will be fun, Zero, Saratev and sighed as he contemplated the image in front of him. Kushina, who was buried 12 years ago, was holding her son in her lap, snuggling next to his mother, whom she had missed for so long, while the woman looked at him with a calculating gaze. It's been a long time, Sarutobi. The elderly leader nodded. Indeed, Kushina. 12 years. I never thought I'd see you again. Kushina dedicated a smile to him, her black eyes making a slightly threatening gesture. Well, you were wrong. I'm back. Saratev and frowned. Yeah, about that. Naruto, I'm sorry, but I think it's better that we finish the jutsu, and you hand me the scrolls with the jutsu and the notes you took. Naruto opened his eyes a lot and squeezed his mother tighter. What? No. I just got it back. And I know how to make more scrolls, she declared firmly. Sarutobi stared at him. Naruto, are you saying that you memorized the sequence of the Leto Tense seal, and in a few hours? Kushina snorted. Why are you surprised? He's in Uzumaki. Seals come as naturally and easily to us as spitting fire at the Uchiha. And considering who his father was, how could he be anything other than a prodigy? Naruto seemed to remember something. Mom, who is my father? Kushina stared at him, completely bewildered. Don't you know that? Her gaze fell on Sarutobi, and now anger burned in her. Don't you know that? He asked. He saluted and sighed. With all the enemies they've made, I thought it'd be better if I didn't know. He cannot boast about secrets that he does not know, which in turn reduces the risk of information leaking to his enemies. Kushina frowned. I get your point. But now I'm back and I'll protect him. Besides, I'll give him some of the training he seems to be missing. She nodded to herself, satisfied with the decision. He saluted and shook his head. I'm sorry, Kushina, but it's better that you come back. The dead should rest in peace, and that jutsu is too dangerous. Kushina narrowed her eyes. Do you suggest erasing it from Naruto's mind? Sarutobi shrugged his shoulders sadly. Kushina, you have to understand that that jutsu was sealed for a very good reason. Kushina Bruno. Sarutobi, you will only get to Naruto after sending me back to the afterlife, and honestly, I don't think you can. Remember, I'm not just a shinobi, I'm a seal master. Sarutobi sighed deeply. I knew that in a normal fight, I would beat Kushina 99 times, but now, things were a little different. She would not get tired, or suffer any injury for more than a few seconds, and a true seal master usually did not need more than one blow to end a fight. It seemed that, for now, I would have to give in. On the positive side, Naruto was an honest and honorable boy, and if Sarutobi got him to promise not to use jutsu again, the boy would fulfill his promise. Still, it was a headache. Naruto, of all the jutsus on the scroll, why did you choose that one? He asked. Naruto looked at him, relaxing more now that the tension had passed. Well, it caught my attention, because someone else made corrections after I wrote it. I thought it might be a clue which one I should learn, and that if someone took the trouble to improve it, it had to be a good jutsu. Saruto and stared at Naruto, not understanding what the boy was saying for the first few seconds. Then he grabbed the forbidden scroll, practically tore it up, and searched for the Edo Tensei. When he saw the corrections, he turned pale. Oh no. Naruto blinked. What's the matter, Gigi? Sarutobi's fingers ran along the lines of the kanji and kana that made up the corrections. I would recognize that letter anywhere. Orochimaru, one of the biggest traders in Konoha's history since Yukiya Madara, and one of my students. Who knows Edo Tensei to the point of having improved it? Her eyes widened in horror as she realized something. Orochimaru had experimented with the Shadai's Agn in hopes of creating Makuden soldiers. And although the only survivor of those experiments was loyal to Konoha, in order to perform such experiments, Orochimaru would need the Shadai's Agn. And since he and his brother were buried in the same place, Orochimaru could summon the first two Hokage. A mischievous smile was drawn on Kushina's face. It seems that circumstances have just changed, right? A traitor, with a technique that allows him to invoke the deceased. I can hear how you are moving, Sarutobi, and whether you have softened or not, you are a good leader. The situation may have demanded to keep the jutsu hidden if there is only one user, but since the enemy already has it, you are not willing to allow him to have a monopoly that allows him to launch Konoha's men against his comrades. Unbeknownst to her, Kushina had struck an even more sensitive chord than she imagined. Seeing the image of the first two Hokage attacking the village they gave their lives for flash before Sarutobi's eyes. Finally, he seemed to collapse in his chair. You win, Kushina. Naruto can keep the jutsu, on the condition that he never sacrifices an innocent for it and uses it wisely. That is, with care and moderation, he added, knowing that Kushina's definition of wisdom might be very different from his. Kushina triumphed. Ha! I've missed 12 years of my son's life, no way. I'm leaving now. I want to meet my baby. And speaking of which, how are Mikoto and Ikari doing? Ha! He saluted and blinked before nodding. Oh yeah, you don't know. I'm sorry to tell you this, but they're both dead. Kushina stared at Tanaka. Dead? How? We were the three strongest kunoichi since Tsunade. How did they die? Sarutobi sighed. Yuga Ikari passed away due to illness shortly after giving birth to her second daughter, Enabi. Uchiha Mikoto died, along with the rest of his clan, except Sasuke, in the Uchiha massacre caused by Uchiha Itachi. Kushina relaxed. Ikari murmured, lost in thought. Mikoto. I don't know how, but I know that his death is Fugaku's fault. If only. He fell silent. Sarutobi felt a twinge of worry. Kushina, what are you planning? Kushina looked up. Who, me? Nothing, nothing. Anyway, I'm taking Naruto home. He told me the address. He got up, picked up Naruto, who had fallen asleep, and walked away. Sarutobi suddenly realized something. Kushina, that's not good. But she was already gone. Sarutobi grimaced. I knew that as soon as Kushina saw the apartment, she would be furious. But right now, he sent a message, indicating that the teams would be decided not tomorrow, but next week. As there were too many things that Sarutobi had to do right now. Kushina was right, he was a good leader, and he knew when it was necessary to sacrifice morality for the common good. That is, the lives of those entrusted to him. There was work to be done. -0, Kushina frowned as she looked at the apartment. From the outside, the place looked like a garbage dump, garbage everywhere. Dirty walls where graffiti and Mu clung to a ruthless struggle for dominance. He found the only door that wasn't half rotten and opened it. The interior was better, but not much. Apparently, Naruto kept the place quite clean, without mold or dirt, although the bare walls still did not create a homely atmosphere. That's it, we're leaving, she mumbled before turning on the shower, half amazed that it worked, and mumbled Mizubin without no jutsu. 3 Kushinas got out of the shower and started to collect everything, while the original took Naruto to his new home, her old one. -0, when Naruto opened his eyes, he found himself in an unfamiliar room. It was prettier than all the rooms I had been in, the bed incredibly soft, but I was still worried. Where was he? Carefully walking around the house, which was almost as big as the entire apartment complex, he tried to find out where he was. He heard a noise coming from a room, peeked carefully around the corner, and looked his mother in the face. Good morning, sleepiness. Your house was a dump, so I brought you here. I must say that the stamps that your dad and I put in worked wonderfully to keep the dust and dirt at bay." Naruto blinked. "Oh, okay." Then he remembered something. "Mom, you still haven't told me who Dad was. Maybe I can call him too. That is, if we find someone really bad." Kushina dedicated a sad smile to him. "Unfortunately not. I analyzed the Matrix while you were sleeping, and I'm afraid it only invokes souls from the afterlife. Your father used a jutsu that sent his soul to another place, so Edo Tensei can't bring him here. And I thought about what Sarutobi said, and at a certain point, unfortunately he is right. Your father made a lot of enemies, and right now you're not ready to face them. I'll tell you soon, I promise." Naruto grumbled, but he was too happy to have a mother to complain. "Fine," he grumbled, before opening his eyes wide in panic. "Damn, he's late." He jumped, but Kushina caught him before he got back to the ground. "Take it easy, Naruto. I salute and sent a notice saying that, due to special circumstances that do not admit of delay, the appointment of the teams has been postponed for a week. So you don't have to worry about that for now. There are other things that are more urgent right now." Naruto blinked. "Like what?" Kushina held up a finger. "First of all, we need to train you. I checked your grades, and from what Iruka wrote, the only source of in the whole folder, it seems that you are still missing some things. Personally, I can work on your basic physical condition, Kenjutsu, although I am not an expert, and Fuinjutsu. There are other people I want to call for the rest. Which brings us to the second issue." He opened a drawer, a characteristic cloud of smoke indicating that something was being opened, and placed it in Naruto's hand. She looked at him. It was a ring, only it seemed to have 3 accessories, hanging 3 strands of hair, as thick as her pinky. 1 jet black, 1 black with a bluish hue, and 1 red. A small metal wrapping attached the hairs to the ring, and each one had a small engraving, a spiral on the red hair. While on the black ones it was marked with a fan, and what looked like a full moon. "What is this?" Naruto asked. Kushina smiled. "That's a friendship ring. There are only 3 in the whole world, since they were made with the hair of the 3 friends for whom they were intended. Should be enough agi for the Edo Tensei. The red hair is mine, by the way." Naruto blinked. "Do you want me to call your friends?" he asked. Kushina nodded. "Yes. Ikari is an expert in taijutsu like no other, and the only one who could know more ninjutsu than Mikoto is the Sandame. They can help you with aspects of your training that I'm not very good at, and I want to see them again." Naruto nodded. The explanation made sense to his young mind. "But I can't just invoke them, I don't want to use it on innocents." Kushina smiled happily, and led Naruto into a large, empty room. With the exception of 2 ragged men in prison clothes in front of his feet, each holding an open scroll. "I thought you would say that, so I borrowed these 2 from Konoha prison, and prepared 2 Lado Tensei scrolls. I put them there myself, so I know who they are." This one kicked him in the left body. He's a bloodthirsty psychopath who murdered his own comrades, so he's a most evil villain. Naruto nodded. "And the other one?" Kushina's smile turned frighteningly cheerful. "Who?" "Him. He is a scumbag, the lowest scum that swarms through this world." He waited a moment before adding a serial rapist to them. Naruto blinked. "Oh." Then he walked over to the scrolls, placed his hair on them, and made the sign with his hand, before an idea assailed him. "Mom, if you could make more scrolls, couldn't you have named them yourself?" Kushina nodded. "I probably could have done it, but it wouldn't seem right to me. You put a lot of effort to learn this jutsu, so it's only fair that you use it. I will just work on a perfect version." Naruto cocked his head. "Then the technique is incomplete." Kushina smiled. "Oh, it's as complete as anyone could make it. You have to respect Orochimaru for his work, and the Nigame even more, for creating it, but it was impossible that a jutsu like this could be completed only with the living." Naruto's face betrayed his confusion. "What do you mean?" Kushina shrugged her shoulders. "I'm not sure, but something changed after they brought me back. Although I don't remember anything, I was in the afterlife, and this experience seems to have affected me. Now I can work the stamps from another perspective, and although it would be nice if other stamp masters like me perfected it, as deceased, at least I can understand the basics of that half. That no living human could really understand the connection between the afterlife and life. But that's in the future, could you call it that? I'm looking forward to a reunion. Naruto nodded and sent his chakra to the scrolls. The seals opened, and the two criminals screamed through the silencer seals as their bodies changed. Kushina handed Naruto 2 of the free will tags, and as soon as the bodies finished forming, Naruto placed them on the heads of the 2 resurrected women. -0, the first woman was slender, with jet black hair falling openly over her back. His eyes looked like black marbles. A second glance was enough to see the black iris. He was wearing what could be described as normal, casual clothes. The second woman had her bluish-black hair pulled back a few inches before the ends, which gave her a neater appearance. She was wearing a white kimono, and her eyes, which in life had been the typical white and yuga, had changed to black. In addition, his body was much more curvaceous. Her bust was probably tight uncomfortably with a cup bra, something that was only noticeable because the kimono was too loose on her. As if she had spent a lot of time in bed. The woman, by reflex, corrected the fit of the outfit, which almost completely hid her figure. The 2 women looked around in confusion before they saw Kushina. They pounced on her. "Kusichin!" exclaimed the Yuga, while the other woman was trying to say, "I thought I would never see you again." After a few minutes of talking, Kushina explained to her 2 friends what happened. The 2 of them nodded before looking at Naruto. "So this is your son?" Mikoto asked. Kushina nodded. "Yes, that's Naruto." And Kari looked at him before hugging him. "Kawaii!" she exclaimed as she pressed Naruto to her writhing chest until he started to turn blue. The other 2 women shook their heads at their friend's antics. It seemed that the future would be quite funny. They were looking forward to seeing the world again. Chapter 2 is finished. Wow! The truth is that I did not expect such a response. More than 100 reviews, 2,340 views, 10 C2, 117 favorites, and 137 alerts, all in about 48 hours. It seems that many expected a story like this. I wonder if this story will remain unique, or if others will adopt it after seeing that it can work if done correctly. As when I accepted the challenge of perfection of the Koala 117, after which others started using it, being my Arenia's favorite. I would love to see what direction other authors would take with Naruto with that jutsu, as the possibilities are almost endless. Now, as for the chapter itself, some things have been clarified, and some questions have been raised. On the one hand, yes, Kushina will stay. She has missed 12 years of her son's life, and like any loving mother, she wants to make up for lost time. In my opinion, if the Kushina in Naruto's mind could, he would have stayed to see his son's life. But he knew his time was limited and accepted it. He doesn't have that problem now. Also, someone argued that since Kushina was in Naruto's head, she could not be summoned by the Edo Tensei. In my opinion, what helped Naruto was not Kushina's soul, but rather one thing. Copy. In a translation I saw, Kushina referred to herself and the Minato that Naruto met as fragments of a soul. Although I personally think they were traces of memories and personality in the chakra rather than the actual souls. Minato's soul is in the Shinigami's stomach, and Kushina's in the pure world, until Naruto called her. As for the argument that Kushina does not reside in the pure world because he said he could meet with Minato, well, even in the Naruto series, the afterlife is not clearly talked about, which leads me to believe that Kushina said it rather in the sense that they can pass to the other world, although perhaps she herself was not sure, and to be honest, it sounds a bit like wishful thinking. There was never any indication that Kushina used the Fujin Shiki. In fact, it is implied that a Hinchuriki cannot perform it, nor that it was the seal used to unite the Kyuubi with Kushina, who looked completely different in chapter 500. So there's no reason for Kushina to end up in the Shinigami's stomach, and there's nothing in the whole manga to suggest otherwise. Except for one little sentence that, viewed from a neutral perspective, can't be taken at face value. It is Kushina's wish to reunite with Minato in the afterlife. It was never really said that it happened to you. As for Kushina, just reverse engineering that seal tag. For one thing, she's a seal master just like Minato, at least in this story. Although I'm pretty sure she was on that level too. Oops. Close to him in the canon, and on the other hand, the label is not so complete. In chapter 522 you see the label, and although the signs can't be read, the label only has 2 lines. So it can't be that complicated for an expert to decipher it. And the effects are not perfect. Kushina only seems to be alive, but regeneration does not go beyond life of the skin. It is essentially no different from an eng that deceives the sense of sight and touch of those who come into contact with the resurrected. What I did with regard to Mikoto and Hinata's mother, whom I decided to call Ikari after not finding information about her real name, is a logical deduction. To begin with, in clans like the Yuga and the Uchiha, blood is important, but to become the leader's wife, that is, the matriarch of the clan, I think it takes more than pure blood and a pretty face. There must have been a lot in clans of that size. And what was the other quality that both clans valued? The force. Both Fugaku and Yasi were bars or names that valued strength over unstable bonds, which is clearly reflected in their behavior. While Yasi may have changed for the worse after his wife's presumed death and his brother's sacrifice, humans rarely change that drastically, so I guess a certain mindset must have been present beforehand. Therefore, it is logical that both Yashi and Fugaku chose the strongest candidate of all. Following that line of thinking, I've decided that both women were teaming up with Kushina. Since at least Kushina and Mikoto seemed to be good friends, and all 3 of them were incredibly strong. There could be some unlikely adaptations in the canon, but rest assured that they will have a proper and logical explanation. Someone said that the summoning should end, and that Naruto should respect the dead. While I agree that these values should be instilled, there are 2 reasons that belie this. 1, they know that Orochimaru possesses that jutsu, and doing nothing gives him an advantage that they know he won't hesitate to use against them, something unlikely in any military organization. Tanzu is the best example that sometimes morality should be relegated to the background. The second reason is that if Naruto doesn't use jutsu out of too much respect, it wouldn't have made sense for him to learn it. One good warning I was given was that I should be very careful not to overpower Naruto and make him invincible. Although I will be careful, Kankuro and Omoi have shown that while resurrected warriors can be almost impossible to kill, they can be captured, as was done with Deidara. So the resurrected ones are not automatically an unstoppable force, they are simply very complex and difficult enemies to defeat. I'll do my best to keep the story interesting, and just a little spoiler, not all resurrected ones should follow Naruto like ghosts, and immediately jump between him and the enemy. And in my opinion, indestructibility comes with jutsu, not with the label on the heads of the resurrected. After Ikari finished hugging Naruto, Mikoto returned from the bathroom she had retreated to for some strange reason. And a big celebratory meeting that lasted until the evening. Finally, a more serious problem arose. Mikoto knew that her family was about to become extinct, but not the severity of the damage. Naruto sighed. Everyone knew about the Uchiha massacre, whether they wanted to or not. She had been talked about too much to ignore, being the only topic of conversation in the city for more than 2 months. So he felt it was his duty to answer the question, since of the 4 people in the room, he was the only one who had been present, read with life, after the consequences. Well, Mikoto Nechin, I heard that the clan was killed to the last member. He quoted the murmurs of 2 women whom he had eavesdropped on, except one. Sasuke Uchiha. He is, or was, in my class. A jerk, always acting like he's superior to others, a real jerk. No offense, Naruto quickly added upon realizing that he was complaining to Sasuke's mother. Now he did feel a little bad. She's not going to complain to a man's mother, that's a baseness. Mikoto frowned. Itachi knew why his son had done what he did, which is why he didn't try to defend himself. He probably could have repelled it, since even without practice, and with Itachi using the Menyeki, the guy had practically no experience with it. He was a prodigy, but he just wasn't up to it, at least not when the massacre happened. Now it could be another story, as long as the boy hadn't done seppuku out of pain. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. He was listed as an S-class missing ninja. I haven't heard anything back since, though I think he'd be the center of attention for a while if someone had cashed in the bounty. They talked about the massacre for months. Mikoto nodded, relieved that her son hadn't taken his own life. He still deeply loved his two sons, no matter what they did. It was part of being a mother. And Carrie looked up. And my children. And Mata and Anab are fine. Naruto scratched his head. I don't know much about the Yuga, sorry, and Carrie, they kick me out. Most of them have a huge stick stuck up their ass, and I stay away from them. They don't like my jokes very much. I've never heard of Anabi, but I know an innate one who looks a lot like you, only she has shorter hair. She's a weird girl, very quiet, she wears a long jacket, but she's not bad. She seems fine, although I never talked to her. And Carrie frowned, but the guy didn't seem to be lying, and he was probably still in the girls with lice phase. I see. Next point. I want to see my children. -0, in the Yuga enclosure, and if Yuga suddenly froze, chills ran down his spine. What's the matter, father? Asked Inabi, who was walking next to her father. Yasi shook his head. It's nothing, he asserted, while wondering where that sudden sense of dread had come from. -0, Naruto scratched his head again. Well, I don't mind, but we shouldn't talk to Gigi. First, Ikari and surprisingly Mikoto as well frowned before their common sense prevailed over their desire for immediate family reunions. After all, it wasn't every day that the dead came back to life, and it would probably cause quite a stir if that became public. On second thought, there was no problem in that becoming common knowledge among a small circle of reliable people, who were obliged under penalty of death not to disclose it, as long as no one could trace they were resurrected until the one who had resurrected them, that is, Naruto. Ikari sighed. Fine. We'll talk to the Okage-sama first. It is not that the deceased come for a daily visit. Mikoto, on the other hand, was looking around. By the way, where is Kushina? Ikari and Naruto looked around in surprise, noticing that the redhead had indeed left. I wouldn't, Ikari muttered. Mikoto sighed again. I would. Naruto looked confused. What's the matter? Mikoto patted him on the head. You see, Naruto, your mother is a wonderful person and a real genius. With the stamps. In combat, he is also incredibly intelligent. Out of the combat. Not so much. And Carrie chuckled. It's not that Kushina is stupid or anything, she's just an occasional airhead. For example, we understand that you have to be very careful. Beware of Edo Tensei, not only for moral reasons, or for the balance of the life cycle, but simply because that jutsu is destined to change people, especially someone as young as you. Mikoto nodded. Using it or randomly won't do any good. To begin with, not understanding. You will see how valuable life is if you simply revive everyone you don't want to die. Some people don't want to be called back, and in other cases, you just shouldn't do it. Life is precious and delicate, and that's a good thing. Edo Tensei can be used for good, but it is still a technique that, if she's not evil, she's at least dark. You must not abuse her. I get it, and Carrie gets it, the Okage gets it. Kushina technically too, but it doesn't look like it. Right now, I would bet my left arm that a grave is going to be finished. Meanwhile, Ikari had activated his Yakugan. The veins around her eyes, still black, swelled as the pupil and iris became easier to see. I found her. He's still here. So saying, he opened a drawer and took out a long rope. Now, let's go get her. -0, Kushina, on the other hand, had taken the opportunity to sneak away without anyone noticing. Ikari and Mikoto probably wouldn't be amused, but I had lived through his anger before, and I could do it again. However, when he opened the door to his enclosure, he came face to face with a viewfinder. Unexpected. Hello, Kushina. Kushina laughed nervously. Salutobi. Nice night, isn't it? The old man nodded. Indeed. What are you up to? Kushina blinked with feigned innocence. Who, me? Nothing. Salutobi arched an eyebrow. In that case, you won't mind giving me the shovel. Kushina blinked. Shovel. What shovel? He looked over his shoulder, where the shovel was clearly visible. Oh, that shovel. Here you go. He handed it to her, Saratev, and held out the other hand. Hand. And the beak. Che said Kushina forcefully. Bad. But he handed her the tool. Saratev, and looked at her sternly. Kushina, I was hoping you would be more responsible. You're not a child anymore, stop acting like one. Don't make me regret it. More of my decision. Kushina lowered her gaze, embarrassed. I had no idea how, but the old man had a job that made you feel terrible doing nothing. It was infuriating. Sorry, it won't happen again. The Sandai nodded at me. On that subject, 2 prisoners disappeared from Konoha prison last night. You won't know anything about it. Kushina's shoes suddenly fascinated me. Huh. No. He had barely finished speaking when something flew over his head. When he looked up, he found his arms fastened to the body by a rope. Before a strong pull lifted her off the ground and threw her into the air. A quick glance indicated to Kushina that it was Ikari who had linked her, probably even less amused by Kushina's idea than Sarutobi. As soon as Kushina was dragged back into the building, the resurrected Yuga exploded. Kushina, you should know better. The Edo Tensei is not a toy to call everyone you want to chat with. What is wrong with you that you get so? Oh hi Sarutobi, it's been so long, hasn't it? Sarutobi stared at the woman in silence for at least 10 seconds, then came down. Head, and let out a deep sigh. He felt the beginning of the mother of all migraines. Guess what, Mikoto is back too. Greetings, Okage-sama. A third voice was heard. Mikoto had joined the group. I just put Naruto to bed. It's been a long day, and I don't think I need to listen to everything we're going to discuss. Only then did Sarutobi become aware of another problem, one that, for a change, only indirectly had to do with Naruto having discovered something that should have been erased from history. Mikoto knew about the Uchiha conspiracy, so his loyalty was questionable, to say the least. Great. A potentially hostile East Range on the loose, now more indestructible than ever. What else could possibly go wrong? No, he doesn't. I can come in. Kushina, still bound, nodded. Go ahead. -0, 3 people were sitting in the living room, and Carrie had offered to prepare you, which had just been served. Saratev, and gave a small drink. Oh, how I missed your tea, Ikari. You have no rival in tea. Ikari smiled as she put the pot down on the table and sat down. Thank you. What is it about? Before Sarutobi could even open his mouth, Mikoto spoke up. This is about the Uchiha clan's plans to take over Konoha and my place in it, right? The 2 women looked at their friend in shock, while Sarutobi simply nodded. The 2 women started talking at the same time, making sure that very few words were understood. Mikoto. It's not serious. Why is that? A joke. Mikoto raised her hand for silence and looked at her friends with pleading eyes, tears rolling down her face. Kushina, Ikari. I know you're upset for me, and rightly so, but please try to understand. Kushina died 4 years ago, and then Ikari passed away. I simply didn't have the strength left to protest Fugaku's actions. I just didn't care anymore. And Kar and Kushina exchanged glances. Although it sounds strange, it was quite plausible. Mikoto was a withdrawn person, and only opened up to very few people. On the other hand, she placed her heart in those she did trust, so losing her closest friends could tear her apart. He saluted and looked at her. So you say you didn't become an Arista after their deaths? Mikoto shrugged her shoulders. That sounds pretty good. Changing the subject, was my son's attack ordered, or was it just a lucky break for Konoha that Itachi decided to stop the coup? Sarutobi stiffened. What makes you think Itachi's actions had something to do with the coup? Mikoto arched an eyebrow with a look of do you think I'm an idiot? Let's see. To begin with, the fact that you know about the hit is suspicious. Of course Itachi said, and I quote verbatim, I'm sorry, but I can't allow your plan to go ahead before you kill me. It's a pretty obvious sign, so, as Kushina would say, cut the bullshit. Sarutobi considered continuing to pretend, but soon realized that no one believed him, so he was sincere. Fine. What I'm going to tell you is an SS rank secret. Yes, Itachi was and still is loyal to Konoha, and the massacre of the Uchiha was ordered. I tried my best to calm the situation down before it got to that point, but I don't think I have to say that I failed. By the time Itachi informed me of the plan, Fugaku had apparently decided that he didn't care about other options. I was against the operation, but in the end I was forced to choose between the Uchiha clan and the safety of Konoha. Mikoto nodded. I don't hold a grudge against him. Not to Konoha, not to you, not to my son. Where is he now? Sarutobi looked at her with regret. I'm afraid that's a secret. I'll just say that, as a missing ninja of that rank, there are things that he can do that others can't. Mikoto nodded. And what about Sasuke? Now, another sigh escaped from Sarutobi's lips. Although Itachi spared his life, he did not leave him unscathed. A genjutsu of unknown origin was applied to him, and his mind has suffered because of it. He's still smart, but cold. He only cares about the glory of the Uchiha clan and killing his brother. Mikoto frowned. Already. I see. Speaking of which, do you think a visit would be possible? Ikari probably wants to see her family too. The aforementioned woman nodded enthusiastically. Sarutobi looked at them. Unfortunately, this is not possible at the moment. However, this brings us to the topic I wanted to discuss with you. Well, Naruto is sleeping right now, and the kid deserves it, but they think they might come to my office tomorrow. Let's say 3 hours before dawn would be enough. But cover your faces, we don't need rumors. Now Kushina got would be. Is it about Edo Tensei? He saluted and nodded. The three women exchanged glances before speaking in unison. We'll be there. Almost against her will, she waved and had to smile. Seeing the three of them together again reminded her of happier times. Fine. And Carrie, would you mind serving me some more of that delicious tea? -0, the next morning, a strange quartet found themselves in the location office long before dawn. Having climbed through the window to avoid the secretary, Sarutobi was already waiting for them. Glad to see you all on time. Naruto yawned. Gigi, it's very early. Sarutovia felt. Yes, Naruto, because what we do here doesn't have to be made public. He took a deep breath. The reason I summoned you is, as you probably have already guessed, the Edo Tensei, and what will be done in the future. I admit I wish we could forget about it, but with how Orochimaru knows, I'm afraid we don't have that option anymore. Orochimaru is not one to waste resources, and with that jutsu he could quickly become very dangerous. I admit that the decision was difficult, but before I tell you about my decision, I want to know one thing. The original technique turns thee into a helpless slave to the whims of the magician. Kushina, you mentioned that you modified the technique to give yourself free will. How far does that go? Kushina smiled. Well, for starters, I improved the physical appearance, as is obvious. As for free will, it is almost absolute. The labels I made for Mikoto, Ikari and myself allow for absolute control over oneself. The only thing Naruto could do is summon us to his location, and maybe sense us when he's not in his line of sight. I considered modifying the tag for subsequent invocations so that it prevents the invocation. It damages the summoner. Why is that? Sarutovia felt. That alteration may be a good idea, but we'll talk about that later. In any case, after careful consideration, I decided that there are individuals that I simply cannot allow Orochimaru to summon. This was perhaps the most difficult decision I made in my time as an Hokage. But I hereby declare the formation of a new branch of the Konoha Shinobi, the existence of which, and even more the identity of its members, is a secret of SS rank. He uncovered 3 sets of clothes. Kushina, Mikoto, and Ikari took one each and they examined it. It was a fairly simple set of gray clothes, wide trousers, socks, sandals, long-sleeved shirts. A special garment that was put on over the head and covered the neck and head, with holes for the face and hair. Gray mask similar to that of a ninja hunter. The kanji-aka, grave on the forehead, and a long coat with a hood, with the kanji of forbidden printed in black on the gray threads. Kushina looked at him. What an interesting design. I guess you have them. Sarutovia felt. Yes, although I would like to ask for your help to improve them. But enough of that. AKA will be a group composed, besides Naruto, only by resurrected, and that's why it will be very small. I'm asking everyone to join in. But there's something else to do now. Follow me. -0, Sarutobi led the four through a secret passage to a windowless chamber, in which two people in prison clothes were sitting in what appeared to be a trance. On a nearby table, there were 2 jars with an unknown substance. Sarutobi sighed deeply. Those 2 vials contained genetic material from the Shodai and the Nigime, respectively. It breaks my heart to do this, but Orochimaru cannot be allowed to call them and force them to attack those who died for them. These 2 are sentenced to death and will be executed today. Naruto looked up. Then I'll call the Hokages. He was torn between emotion and worry. Of course it was great, but the reactions to that jutsu had not been very enthusiastic so far. Salutovia felt. Naruto took out 2 scrolls prepared in advance, unrolled them, and poured the genetic material on them. He then activated the jutsu and witnessed 2 legends returning to the world of the living. -0, 2 figures stood up, still dazed. One was wearing a red armor and her long hair was straight and black. The second one was wearing a blue armor and her hair was more pointed and snow-white. The red figure spoke first. "Where are we?" The white-haired one sighed. "It seems that we have been summoned back from the grave, although I do not know for what purpose." Sarutobi spoke. "Esirama-sensei, Tobirama-sensei, it's been a long time." They both looked at him. Esirama cocked his head. "Sarutobi, you've grown old." Sarutobi smiled. "In fact, the decades I've lived tend to do that." Apparently, Tobirama was more business-oriented. "Did you call us back? I must admit that I am disappointed, although in your case it may be that you have simply become senile." Saratev and sighed. "Yes, you were called back under my responsibility, but I am not your summoner." The 2 Hokage looked around the room and fixed on the other 4. 3 were women, but they were all pointing to the 4th, a boy. Tobirama arched an eyebrow. "A child? Have you taught Edo Tensei to a child?" Sarutobi blushed slightly. "Of course not. The situation is complicated, but a brief summary would be that the young Naruto was tricked into stealing the Forbidden Scroll, saying that learning a technique would allow him to graduate from the Shinobi Academy, and, thanks to various factors, he succeeded. Unfortunately, he chose and learned Edo Tensei." Ashirama looked at the old man sternly. "And why did you allow him to keep it?" "There's a good reason." Now Sarutobi looked really old. "I have failed them both, especially you, Tobirama-sensei. You entrusted that jutsu to me, and because of my negligence, it fell into the hands of one of the most dangerous traitors in the history of Konoha, and one of my own students, Orochimaru. He left Konoha years ago, but if it weren't for the young Naruto, he would still ignore his knowledge. As much as I hated him, and I swear by everything I hold dear, I hate him, I decided that I couldn't allow that crazy man to use those who gave their life for Konoha to destroy her. And Orochimaru hates Konoha enough to do that. That's why I came to the conclusion that perhaps it would be wiser to call you, so that until the crisis passes." But Esirama had already tied the knot. "We cannot be invoked by the enemy." Tobirama nodded. "It makes sense and seems reasonable, although we will want more information. But how will you explain our presence?" Sarutobi sighed. "For now, not at all. The situation is delicate, and we cannot rush into it. I decided to form a new group of the Konoha forces, just for those called back. It will be a small group, hopefully, composed only of those who agree, of course, but I think we will be able to make the best of this mess." Naruto spoke. "And maybe we should get to this." He held up 2 tags in the air. Tobirama glared at him. "Don't get cocky, you little brat. There is no chance that you will put slave labels on us." Naruto felt tears welling up in his eyes, but he held them back. It hurt that someone he idolized was staring at him. But those are not slave badges. Kushina hugged him from behind and patted his head to reassure him. Shh, it's okay, they couldn't know." Naruto snuggled up against her, before blushing, and trying to play hard to get. "These labels have been modified. You will keep full control of yourself, but your appearance will improve. You'll look the same as when Well, when you were alive, except for the black sclera. The two Hokages shot a questioning glance at Tsurutobi, who nodded. Tobirama lowered his head first, and Naruto placed the tag carefully. A radiant color spread over the Senju's body. Esirama looked at him. And? His brother nodded. It works. I feel better than before, and I have my body under control. Esirama lowered her head, and a few seconds later, the brothers looked as if they had never heard of death. Tsurutobi looked at them. So, I guess they agree to help. The two of them exchanged a glance before nodding. Tobirama gave a sad smile. In a way, this whole mess is indirectly my fault, so the least I can do is help sort it out. Esirama nodded. I also offer my help. Now that this matter is over, what exactly are we going to do? Tsurutobi shrugged his shoulders. I must admit that all the details have not been worked out yet, but they will be a group similar to the Black Ops. They will answer only to me, as will probably be inevitable, to their summoner. Tobirama punched his brother in the ribs. Won't it be strange to receive orders from little Tsurutobi? Esirama nodded wisely. Tsurutobi had to chuckle, but he tried to continue anyway. You will do high-risk missions, and in some cases, like yours, Tobirama-sensei, you will work in the Edo Tensei, hoping to find a counterattack. And a perfected version, Kushina added. Noticing that all eyes were on her, she cleared her throat and added only for academic purposes. And who is she? He asked Shirama. Tsurutobi sighed deeply. Since we've reached this point, perhaps I should tell you the full story. Let's see, it started, chapter 3 finished. Another chapter finished, again with little to no action, but I feel the groundwork needs to be done right, or the story will suffer later on. Many of my readers were right to suggest reviving the Hokages, for obvious reasons. There will be more resurrected over time, and I must thank Kishimoto for the novelty. Since the introduction of new characters a lot allows me a wider range of options and new ideas. On the other hand, sometimes it makes me want to strangle him. While I impatiently wait for him to finally reveal what Gaara's father can do. This may be a small spoiler, but I'm sure many of my smart readers would have suspected it anyway. I intend for Orochimaru to call Gaara's father, among others, after realizing that he cannot call the Hokages. But I do not know what he can do. It's quite annoying. What also distracts me is that I come up with ideas for scenes that are so far in the future that it's practically useless to think about them, since I can't even be sure if I manage to create a situation in which the scene fits. Now, in another order of things, the touching reunions between father and son will have to wait a while. AKA is top secret right now, and will probably remain so for quite a while. And as for why Tsurutobi was not surprised, it is that the man was not born yesterday. I almost expected Kushina to call them, so her reaction was more of resignation than surprise. And to clarify some things I found in the reviews. First, Edo Tensei requires a living sacrifice, not a corpse, unless it is a DNA source. Secondly, if I decide to match a resurrected, the first thing I will do is make sure that the corpse goes through something similar to Sasuke's brother, which means that he will be completely annihilated, and when he is rebuilt, the body of the original sacrifice will not do. And the jutsu will be perfected and advanced even further before taking that step. Some said that Kushina could help Naruto learn to handle the power of the Kyuubi. In my opinion, Kushina is a lousy person to teach Naruto about Hinshiriki. They chose her specifically because her chakra could suppress it better, and you noticed how they crucified the fox. I probably wouldn't have been able to give Yuki to Kushina even if I wanted to, tied up like that. Kushina was not collaborating with the fox in any way. It was literally a mobile prison that didn't let the slightest spark of Yuki escape. He doesn't know anything about how to handle the Yuki. And as for the fox, he will probably appear soon. Esirama sighed. In short, this boy was tricked into stealing the scroll, and out of all the techniques available, he chose the Edo Tensei. Using the one who tricked him to summon his mother, the last of the Uzumaki clan, who in turn used the technique to summon to his best friends, an Uchiha and an Ibuga. I should be surprised, I really should. But, for some reason, I'm not. Tobirama smiled. It must be because you know the Uzumaki well, seeing your girlfriend. Mito mentioned that you had a very funny expression when he sealed the Kyumi. Esirama frowned. I was engaged in mortal combat with my nemesis, and suddenly my wife. My fiancé at that time, corrected Tobirama, smiling smugly. My future wife appears, Esirama yielded with an annoyed expression. He leaps towards the most powerful of the tailed beasts, straight into its mouth. Then, there is a flash of light, and the Kyubi disappears. He had every right to be puzzled. Madara also looked pretty stupid, if I remember correctly. Zero, somewhere, a man with a mask, and only one eye sneezing. Why do I suddenly feel the need to blush with shame, and hit something with frustration? -0, he waved and watched the scene with some amusement. Banter between the Enju brothers had always been a source of great entertainment in their youth. But now was not the time for such amusements. Either way, Orochimaru possesses such a jutsu, and we cannot allow it to be considered an indestructible army without counterattack. I've heard that Suna has something that could be used, but despite being allies, I would prefer that this leak be kept as discreet as possible. Then he turned to the second group in front of him. Kushina, until more preparations are made, do you think you can allow the Namikaze complex to be used as Aka's temporary headquarters? Kushina shrugged her shoulders. Well, the place is big enough, it's far enough away from civilization to go unnoticed, but close enough for a quick exit. And pretty well stocked. It's not that most of us need it, since we don't need it anymore. Food or rest, although different weapons and other tools could be useful. In fact, if my old stamp chamber is still the way I left it, it's probably the best place to work on our projects. Apart from the Edo Tensei, there are some stamps that I would like to add to our uniforms. However, Sarutobi, I'm technically dead, so you should ask its rightful owner, our summoner. Sarutobi rolled his eyes. Well, Naruto, would you mind if your new home became Aka's temporary headquarters? Only until we can find a more suitable location. Naruto smiled happily. I don't care. The more the merrier, right? For a boy who grew up completely alone, living not only with his mother and the other nice women, but also with two of his idols, was like a dream come true. Sarutobi nodded. Then it's decided. I'll let you know if anything new comes up, but for now, you need to get the hell out of here before anyone sees you. The others nodded and turned to leave when Sarutobi stopped. Oh, and Naruto. Do not forget that the classification of your team. It's in 6 days. Despite the unusual circumstances, they are still a genin, and the team is a fundamental part of Konoha's shinobi system. I think your mom will agree on the importance of a team, right, Kushina? The redhead looked at her two best friends, who returned her the look. They all smiled and nodded before heading back to the compound, their new headquarters. -0, it's okay, Naruto. I want to see how you're doing with taijutsu, so we'll have a little training. Don't worry, I won't hurt you, you can't hurt me, Ikari explained. They were back at the compound, at the training ground. Kushina had informed the others about how they had sabotaged Naruto's learning before retreating to the sealed chamber with Tobirama. Engaged in a heated debate about the seals and what should or should not be added to their uniforms. As one of the greatest taijutsu masters in the history of the elemental continent, and one of the few Yugas who had seen beyond her own jerkin, Ikari volunteered to test Naruto's abilities in his field of specialization. He arrived with little expectations, but still, she leaned back slightly to avoid a careless kick. And when Naruto raised his fist to throw a punch, she caught the hook even more sloppily and sent Naruto to give spins through the air, catching him gently before he hit the ground. Stop it. She considered hugging him for a while longer, but the situation was serious. Maybe another time. He took it down. Naruto, be honest. You're self-taught, and your sparring partner was a log, right? Naruto blushed, but nodded. No one explained anything to me and my colleagues. Sparring partners always beat me. I tried to copy what they were doing. And Kari sighed. As I thought. Naruto, I'll be honest. You need a lot of work. She was tempted to be direct and say that her taijutsu was lousy, almost lousy, but she didn't want to hurt too much. The feelings of the little one. I would take him down gently. Your body doesn't know what it's doing half the time, and you're spreading every attack. Your movements are useless, and you are not applying your body weight to your punches and kicks. We have a lot of work to do. Now my preserve will put you to the test. Then, we girls will sit down and make a plan that will help you get stronger quickly, okay? Naruto, who had shrunk under the in his eyes severe sentence, smiled beaming, and ran to Lucia, who was waiting for him, not noticing the frown on the face of the result. It resists a lot of damage, and its resistance is very high, but the rest. I have a lot of work ahead of me. After Mikoto sent Naruto to lunch, she, Ikari and Kushina, who had finally stopped bothering the Nidaime, sat down together. Kushina looked at her friends. Tell me straight, how bad is it? And Kari spoke first. Bad. It seems that he learned most of taijutsu on his own, and what little he was taught, he was obviously taught poorly. I have to start from scratch with him and make him and his body forget the wrong movements. He's a tough guy, and he has incredible stamina, but that's pretty much all he has. At best, he is a fighter rather than a real fighter. Kushina grimaced and looked at her other friend. Mikoto? Former matriarch Uchiha shrugged her shoulders. Well, compared to what I deduced, Naruto is not as far behind as in taijutsu. His chakra control is lousy, and to put it mildly, and the only jutsu he masters are kawerimi and enge. But from what I gathered, he's not much less than any first-generation shinobi. He can't do the bunsen, but I think it's just because he's always overloading the technique. To put it mildly, his chakra is through the roof. Probably because he's a Hinshiriki, but in my opinion, that makes chakra control even more important. Kushina nodded. I don't want him to start with Fuinjutsu before he's at least good in the other aspects. So you two will be his head coaches for now, if that's okay with you. How much do you think you will be able to do in the 6 days until the team classification? And Kari shrugged helplessly. I'm not a witch, Kushina. I can't let Naruto unlearn and relearn all his taijutsu in a week. I can give him some advice, maybe correct the most obvious flaws, but it would take a lot more time to turn him into a real fighter. Especially because we have to figure out what he's good at first. It's no use teaching him something he might not be fast enough or flexible enough for. Or something that doesn't allow him to use all his strengths. Mikoto touched her chin. Well, as for me, before I can teach him much, he needs to improve his chakra control. If I teach him to walk through the trees now, he will probably be taking his first steps in the water before leaving with the equipment. I also want to see if he already has any elemental affinity, and teach him a different cloning technique. With all that we have to do, I'm considering teaching him the Kajibun-sin, just so he can keep up. It was a joke, but Kushina touched her chin. Do you know? It's not such a bad idea. Thanks to the hairball, he has chakra to spare, and unless he tries to get his clones to read an entire library and then dissipate at once, mental overflow shouldn't be a problem, since information accumulates before return to the user, during which too similar information is discarded. It's the only way to create more than 5 and not look like a vegetable. Mikoto rolled her eyes. Yes, Kushina, I know. Unlike you, I can use that jutsu, remember? Kushina blew her cheeks. Wicked. It's not my fault that my chakra is too dense for most regular jutsus. I can't stop ninjutsu and genjutsu from blowing up in my face when I try them, limiting myself to fuinjutsu, taijutsu, and how little kenjutsu it is. Learned. His voice had become sharper, turning into an angry screeching towards the end. Her inability with the regular jutsus, which practically always ended with her coughing up smoke from the obligatory explosion when they were overloaded, was a very sore point. Yes, Ikari interjected cheerfully. Instead, it is so dense that you can not only use it to bind energy structures such as jutsu enemies and biju, but you can even form it and use it as a physical tool, something that was supposed to be impossible. Do you remember Yashi's face when you made a chakra shield and he hit his face because he didn't know it was solid. Against her will, Kushina had to laugh, joining her two friends in their fun over the head of the Yuguga clan. Jassie's shocked expression, complemented by his broken nose, which gave him the look of a pancake, had been really hilarious. Making fun of husbands had become almost a ritual between the three of them, although, of course, each woman could only tell stories about her own husband. After all, it wasn't as if they wanted to provoke each other. After wiping the tears from her laughter, Kushina looked at her friends. "It's great to be together again. I missed them." There whispered Ikari, deeply moved. She had always been the most sentimental of the three. "We love you too, Kusachin." Mikoto just nodded, enjoying the sight of her two best friends, whom she had had to watch bury, now back and joking. Two of the people she had loved more than her life had returned, and she was more than willing to help the one who made it possible. "All right. And Kushina, you win. I'll teach Naruto the Kagebunsen, and then I'll train chakra control with them, while Ikari shapes his true self." Kushina raised her fist. "Datebane. My son will be big in no time." Ikari and Mikoto exchanged glances before chuckling. "You still say that word, Kusachin?" Ikari asked. Kushina blinked and then blushed. "Shut up," he shouted before muttering, "I can't help it." Mikoto laughed. "We already know that, Kusi. We're just teasing you. Now, let's help your little one reach an acceptable level, okay?" -0, Naruto dropped tired on his bed. His day had been exhausting, although in reality, it had not been so much. After the initial tests, Mikoto Wanchan came to him and taught him a new jutsu. He told her that the reason why he could never create a clone that did not instinctively provoke the desire to finish the poor creature was that it had too much chakra and was overloading the technique. Naruto seemed quite confused, until she compared it to trying to water a flower pot with a river. Suffice it to say that he was quite surprised to find that he was unknowingly drowning his jutsu in chakra. Then she gave him a different cloning technique, one that, according to her, would be useful in his training, and promised to teach him something interesting once Naruto learned this technique, seeing that Naruto did not seem happy with having to review clones, his worst subject. It had taken him almost 4 hours, with forced breaks, but he managed to learn how to create solid clones. Which, in retrospect, was great. He could make jokes and, at the same time, create an alibi for himself that even Iruka-sensei couldn't figure out, which was a great idea. On the other hand, Iruka-sensei was a shinobi, so he probably knew that solid clones existed. Rats. Still, after he learned it, Mikoto Nechen had told him what the Kagebunsen were for, what could be done with them, and what should not be done with them, after which he took 50. He counts clones, and, as Naruto learned after they dissipated, he trained them in chakra control. The leaf-floating exercise to be precise, while Ikario Nechen had called him and given him instructions. Simple about how to throw a punch or a kick to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. After which he had shown her some basic concepts, more that, according to her, she should have learned at the academy. It hadn't really been much, but Naruto felt completely out of breath after completing the day's training. Still, it had been a happy day for Naruto. He had people who loved him, who helped him train, and who recognized and accepted him as he was. He had a family. The door opened and Kushina came in smiling. "Hi Sochi, I heard that you had a great day." She sat on his bed and threw him out. Naruto smiled. "Aha." Mikoto Nechen and Ikari Nechen said he was doing very well. Although Ikario Nechen is a little strict. Kushina's laughter turned slightly nervous as she remembered the Yuga's reaction to some of her jokes. And how she mercilessly berated the damn fan after she made. It was something that Ikari considered stupid. Well, that's right, Ikari-chan. It may be that way, but he really cares. He just wants you to be as strong as possible before the teams are announced. Imagine the faces your teammates would make when they saw you beat the best. Naruto's smile widened as he imagined himself beating Sasuke effortlessly. That would be great. Arrogant fear. Kushina shook her head in amusement. Come on, let's not rush, it will still take time. It's not just about who trains you, but also about how much training you have. You can't expect to surpass those who trained 4 years in just 1 week. A little more time is needed. Then he clenched his fist. But my son will be the best, Datevin. Forget it. Good night, Naruto. Naruto smiled happily. Good night, Mom. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead. May you have sweet dreams, Sochi. She turned around, holding back the tears. It was the first time she had the opportunity to tuck her son in. I had finally got him back, I could really be with him. In life, she had only had minutes with her son, but now, even if 12 years had passed, she could finally be a real mother. None of her friends had ever had to settle for so little time with their children, and to be caught by the force if something stopped her. -0, Naruto opened his eyes in a daze. Where was he? It was dark and humid, although a little light came from everywhere and from none, just enough to see. This looked like a sewer, but since he had gotten there, he looked at the tunnel in front of him. Something seemed to be calling him, an invisible force tugging at his mind to force him to go there. Unsure, but with no real alternatives, Naruto obeyed the call and landed in a large chamber. Its most distinctive feature was undoubtedly the gigantic door, closed by what looked like a single paper label. Suddenly, an eye, bigger than Naruto, opened. A squinted pupil focused on Naruto, surrounded by a crimson iris. You've come? Fine. The light increased and Naruto found himself in front of a giant fox. Kyuubi, he murmured. That's right, replied the fox. Naruto took a deep breath to calm down. What do you want? And where are we? We are inside your mind, Kyuubi replied calmly. As for why you're here, I wanted to talk to you. Naruto swallowed hard. Well, about what? Kyuubi smiled. A proposition. Naruto narrowed his eyes. What could you want from me? Kyuubi felt. You're right, of course, as a human you have little to offer me. You're weak, and even if you wanted to, you couldn't let me out. However, recently, something changed. You went from being a despicable prison to a potential one. Very interesting asset. Naruto thought about what the fox might mean, and then he suddenly opened his eyes. The Edo Tensei whispered. The fox smiled, revealing rows of razor-sharp fangs. Yes. Impossible. Simple humans treading on God's territory. To recover something that by divine will would be irreversibly lost. Through seals, the only field where there is no mortal limit, no threshold. The only field where no one thought to put a glass ceiling that humans could access, humanity has created a miracle. And what does it matter to you? Naruto asked nervously. Was he really bothering the gods? Because I hate him. Kyuubi replied. There are a lot of things I hate. The Sage of the Six Paths. Madara Uchiha. Esirama Senju. Uzumaki Myth. Minato Namikaze. The Toads. Kushina Uzumaki. But more than anything, I hate the Shinigami. He stole more than 2/3 of my power and, in return, took over Namikaze's soul, a violation of his own laws and rights. The Shiki Fuin, the contract with the Shinigami, works simply soul by soul. He didn't take away my soul, just my power. When they sealed me up, he had nothing to do with it. According to the ancient laws, I should have let Namikaze go, or at least sent him to the pure world, and given me back my power. But he didn't, breaking the old law. However, in doing so, he self-destructed for at least 100 years. During those 100 years, it can only appear when invoked and act only as allowed by the contract. To attack the user's target, and nothing more. He can't help anything. Misuse in his domain, death, nor is he allowed to subsequently punish any offense committed in that span. In other words, even if that jutsu of yours throws the circle of life and death into chaos, it can only observe and repair the damage. His hands are tied, he cannot stop what causes the damage or reverse what has been done. He can't touch you, otherwise he would have crushed you the moment you summoned that damn woman, who was my former prison. You see, he's robbed me, so I'll make sure he suffers for it. Naruto swallowed hard. And my part in this, Kyuubi smiled almost fondly. You, Naruto, are the key to my revenge. Through you I will make him suffer. I just ask you to invoke many, many souls, I don't care, and in return, I will give you what all the other Hinchiriki can only dream of, all my support. Kyubi seemed lost in thought for a moment, then smiled. In fact, I'll make you even more attractive. Nearby are the remains of 2 of my most loyal servants. I'll give you the command over them. Naruto bit his lip. It sounded tempting, but the possibility of an angry god chasing him didn't seem so much. And the Shinigami will stand on their arm. Crusaders, and they will accept it. Kyubi smiled. He has no other choice. The realm of the living is Kami's domain. The only power he has here is the one she gives him. The pure world is under the control of Yami, and there he also means little. Shinigami only dominate those who belong to them. By contract, he is not the power of the afterlife, he is simply the guardian of death, the flow between the worlds. It could be said that he is in charge of the path that the dead must travel to reach their destination, but nothing more. The dead wandering in the world of the living, or a living person in the world, pure world, those are not really his problems. Only that the process forces him to restore order on the path of life and death. As for the other 2, if Yami hadn't wanted you to call those in his domain, he would have prevented it. If Kami hadn't wanted you to use it, she would have never forced you to learn. That idea you had of consulting the scroll, that was his will guiding you. Naruto blinked in confusion. But if what you said was true, why did they want me to use something that causes so much chaos? Kyubi shrugged his shoulders, which was a bit strange, since Naruto had never known that the foxes were able to make that gesture. I don't know, I'm just a fragment of a god. But if I had to guess, I would say that Kami allows it because it was her law that the Shinigami broke, and it wasn't the first time. And Yami has always been capricious. Rumor has it that when the Nigai invented Edo Tensei for me, she gave him permission to summon the dead. To protect him from the Shinigami, just because she wanted to see what was up. Eternal life can be pretty boring, so I guess Kami and Yami help you for their own amusement. But back to the point, done deal or not. Naruto weighed his options, feeling that he was about to make a pact with the devil. Still, on second thought, Kyubi only offered her support if she did something that, realistically, she probably would have done anyway. You will not try to take over my body, kill me, or deceive me in any way. Kyubi felt. I will give you my chakra only when you ask for it or really need it. I will not take over your body without your permission, or use it against your will, or control it any longer than necessary. I will give you advice, but I will not deceive you. I will not try to harm you or plan anything that could harm you. Naruto bit his lip and reluctantly nodded. Fine. Under those conditions, I accept. Kyubi smiled maliciously. Excellent. Then let's make that goddamn desperate Jima. You will hear from us again soon. However, as agreed, I will give you the location of the mortal remains of my servants. But now it's time for you to wake up. The world became a blur, and the last thing he heard was the sadistic and joyful laughter of the fox. -0, Naruto. Naruto, wake up, said a calm voice. Ha. 5 more minutes, muttered the dazed boy, turning to go back to sleep. And Carrie frowned. Once. Then, a cloying smile was drawn on her. I had experience in situations like these. Kushina was just as bad. No, now. He stated sweetly as he yanked the covers away, throwing Naruto in the air as he spun around like a top, before the blonde boy landed safely on the mattress. I got up. She screamed frantically as she noticed a bucket of water suspiciously near her bed. And Carrie felt. Fine. There are some things about AK that we need to discuss now. In addition, Kushina and the Nigai believe that they have made a small breakthrough in Edo Tensei, and they will probably try it too. Kyuzi will probably go crazy if we don't try her latest stroke of brilliance. Something about the way he said brilliance made it seem like he had meant to say insanity, but he held back. You have 3 minutes to get dressed, we will wait for you in the living room. The twinkle in his eye made it clear that he meant 3 minutes and 0 seconds. Making it reasonable, Naruto hurried to get dressed. -0, when he burst into the room, Naruto sweated a drop. Kushina, Mikoto, the Senju brothers, the Sandaime and Ikari were sitting at the table. Ikari was pressing a stopwatch. All right, Naruto, you have 10 seconds left. Naruto laughed nervously. And Kario Nechin looked suspiciously disappointed. So, why are we here? Sarutobi cleared his throat. Well, mainly because I considered it prudent to inform you about the progress of Aka's training so far. Fortunately, due to the nature of most of its members, AKA has very little need for funds. There are still some problems to be solved, mainly to quickly reach key positions or just to report. But I am optimistic in that regard. While Konoha is not poor, the circumstances. In circumstances, they make it almost impossible to transfer large amounts discreetly for no reason, but I think Aka's income will be more than enough with the rewards of the missions they complete. It is standard in Ambu missions that the identity of those who completed them is kept secret, even from other Ambu members, and that the rewards are also delivered directly to ensure that they are untraceable, so archiving the missions here under that clause will not be a problem. Also, on the subject of new members, I've done some research, and thanks to the hospital, we have genetic material from all the active shinobi. So in case of a death among the specific volunteers, if they had assets, it would be possible to recruit. However, I am aware that some other extraordinary situation may arise, or modifications of the Edo Tensei may have to be tried, and that current members may not be exempt of the counter-attack tests, so I made some preparations. He paused, regaining his strength, before continuing. It hurts me a lot, but I checked with the Konoha prison. As morbid as it sounds, AKA currently has a budget of 5 executive criminals. Kushina has already brought them to the basement and prepared their prisons. While you are here, you are responsible for your basic needs, including expenses. Needless to say, this is a sign of my confidence, and I hope that none of you will disappoint me. You will understand that I wish to be present at all the recruitments that take place at Konoha. Kushina nodded. We get it. In fact, Tobirama and I have been working on something that we needed to test, so we will use one of them directly. After seeing the man's annoyed look, he smiled at the group. At first he was opposed, but I managed to convince him. I have already said it and I repeat it, madness is hereditary in that clan, Tobirama muttered under his breath. Naruto raised a hand. I'm sorry, but this is important. I just talked to the Kyuubi, and he gave me the location of the corpses that could be to be useful to me. I do not know what to think, but it is possible that the offer is genuine, right? A complete pandemonium followed that statement. Chapter 4 is finished. It took forever, but I have a lot to do right now. Not much to do yet, but patience. Please, I'm laying the groundwork. Well, there are no new summons, but there will be 3 in the next chapter. Any ideas? Oh, and Sarutobi's explanation focused on how Naruto learned Edo Tensei, not on his entire past. The fact that he is the Hinchiriki of the Q. Leb was only mentioned briefly, in favor of how Mizuki ended up giving it all away for a good cause. There will be a proper outrage over this treatment later on. And since someone mentioned it, no, Kabuto explicitly stated that the death of the summoner does not end the summoning. In fact, all he would do, it would be that the technique would be impossible to cancel. As for the Kyuubi, I never quite understood why the Shinigami took Minato. According to the description, it is always 2 souls that are brought together, which then get trapped in an eternal combat inside the stomach of the god of death. How exactly is it supposed that only a mass of the Kyuubi's power is going to put up resistance? Personally, his reaction was rather, no, I did not manage to seal the Kyuubi. Well, there's no reason not to grab a souvenir before I leave. Of course, Minato's expectations aside, the Shinigami had been. I am still called to solve the Kyuubi problem, and it failed. The Kyuubi was weakened, but it was there and had enough strength to kill Naruto's parents. I added that about Kami and Yami because I don't want to give too much influence to a god that Naruto is about to seriously antagonize. After all, he is the god of death, not of the afterlife. This chapter was a bit slow, but necessary. After all, AKA is not a chess club that meets in an apartment, but an organization with a high recruitment potential and a low risk of deaths. Disabling injuries or retirement are remarkably low, which requires a lot of work. It is necessary to establish hierarchies, since there will be little on paper for the rest of the village. AKA must bring his own files, everything must be organized, food for prisoners, equipment and other things consume money. No budget. It is necessary to establish lines of communication. There is a lot to be done before AKA is as functional a group as LOS, and, especially since the members are, voluntarily or not, much closer to each other, which means that everyone will have a more neighborly relationship familiar than in between colleagues, and each new member will surely bring some change in the dynamic. So please be patient. There will be a lot of action, but I need some preliminary work first. And no, Naruto isn't going to get super cool in a week. By the time the pre-team training is over, his level won't be Kai Zimbuni, but Genin's, with maybe 1 or 2 high-powered and under-controlled jutsus if Mikoto is kind enough.